Mr. Riyami, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, just a test. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the Charter Review Board meeting, Monday, July 19th, 2021. It is 2:00. If everyone would please remember to silence your cell phones. If the deputy town clerk would please call the roll.
Member Greenwald,
Here.
Member Kai, Vice Chairperson Rosen, Chairperson Donaldson,
Here.
Town Attorney Torcivia, Town Manager Labadie.
Present.
Thank you.
If you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, next up on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Or do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda? Okay, motion to approve the agenda is presented.
So moved.
And a second. Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Minutes, the agenda then is approved. Public comments. We have no members of the public here present today. However, have we had any written communications for comments?
No written
No.
comments.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move right into unfinished business then. And within that context, we have a couple of things I'd like to do. One is we have the follow-up by the town attorney on some language and other topics that we'd ask him to undertake at the last meeting. We will have a discussion on any remaining open items, see if we can dispense with those today. And Mr. Tai also, I believe, has an item he would like to discuss also under unfinished business, judging from the paper I just received a little while ago. So if we could start with the town attorney and the letter we received on the 16th, if you could give us a bit of a synopsis on where we are.
Sure, if you want me to go item by item or just hit the ones that I thought there was some comments on, what's your preference?
Maybe we can do that as we get to the items as we go through. That would be the part of the discussion on each item, probably.
Well, we can do that if that's the pleasure of the board. We can walk through those. Okay. Then we'll start at the beginning of the list and work our way down. Let's see. For the items we have on the table section 106.3 dealing with terms of office. And we had taken action at the last meeting, as I recall, on this particular item. I'm not aware of any outstanding issues on this item.
You want us to comment or? I have nothing
I'd
else
be
to
glad to
add.
receive more comments, certainly.
No, I don't have any.
Okay.
I'm fine with this.
Yeah. All right. Okay, we're going to let section 106.3 stand then. Regarding rules of procedure, quorums, and meetings, at the last meeting, we adopted language that would propose to change the charter, referencing the commission should hold at least one regular meeting each month to shall hold at least one regular meeting each month. And I believe that is consistent with the motion and what was passed. So we seem to be good on that one. And rescue protection. I believe at the last meeting, we had asked the town attorney to draft specific language to include water, but exclude sewer. So I don't believe we took official action on adopting it with the language we see today. But I would be open to a motion to adopt this language.
Motion to adopt.
Thank you, Ron. Do we have a second? Is there any discussion on this item? Dr. Greenwald?
Yes, I just want to be sure that I'm in favor of this as is. I just want to be sure that when it says outsource, I mean, we don't want to abolish all forms of any kind of interlocal agreements, obviously, for any of these items. Mostly don't want to give up control. So I don't know whether this language, and I'm asking our attorneys if whether this language is okay for that or whether we're going to have some sort of an issue with any sort of an interlocal agreement, which clearly is not our intent. Our intent was control, basically.
Vice Chair Rosen?
I don't think outsource connotes participating in an interlocal agreement. I think outsource means basically shoving it off, if you will, an inartful description to another entity.
That's fine. That's the only clarification I'm interested in. I just want to make sure that we're not having an unintended consequence of our language. If we can be reassured as to that, then I'm all in favor of proceeding with this.
I think we are in agreement on that intent. And if the town manager, did you have a comment you want to make on that one?
I'm just looking at the dictionary's definition of outsource, which is to obtain goods or a service from an outside supplier, especially in the place of an internal source, in place of an internal source. So that's kind of what we had envisioned. So we can't go to another supplier for that goods and services. We have to supply it or produce it ourselves with control. That jurisdictional or controlling jurisdiction, I think was somebody's word. I don't know. Vice Mayor there had it or not, so.
Town attorney,
Yeah,
do we feel on pretty good grounds here that we have the right language on this?
well, I hear the doctor's concerns, and it makes me wonder if we shouldn't add a sentence at the end along the lines of, this does not preclude the town from contracting. And the next part is the hard part. Contracting what? Contracting a portion of those services, contracting for the provision. For example, if I took your concern to the logical extreme, we couldn't even buy any equipment. I don't think that's the way it's intended to be written, but intended to be the way it's written. But I hear your concern. You don't want it to be kind of inadvertently backing into the $350,000 box in this language and saying, oh, we can't even buy chemicals or supplies or whatever we need for the water plant. I don't think that's the way it's intended. I don't think that's the way it reads, but I don't know if we need a clarifying sentence.
Well, I was actually thinking more broadly than that. I mean, for police, for fire rescue, we're going to have like some backup agreements for additional services from surrounding communities. Want to make sure we don't inadvertently, get rid of that. When it comes to water, should our water plant shut down for major maintenance, we may need to turn on the water supply from Boca Raton, for example. I want to make sure that that doesn't become a major issue. I guess that would fall under some maybe natural emergency category or something.
Right.
But I'm not saying that this isn't the appropriate language. I just want to check and make sure everybody's comfortable before we go ahead. That's all.
I think we specifically left out that term interlocal so that they could continue to do those kinds of associations for the benefit of the town. So I remember we did have a discussion on that at one time. There was that word in there. We got rid of it. Nonetheless, it sounds like maybe we need to tweak this a little bit more.
Yeah, I'll look a little bit more because again, I was really taking the direction from the commission and the mayor's comments the last time in terms of let's make sure this is a foolproof box, basically. And I want to make sure we didn't make it so foolproof that we don't inadvertently restrict our ability to contract for backup services.
Well,
Again, I don't-
perhaps
I
the
don't-
way to do that is to make outsource a separate sentence. So that, because abolish, merge, sell, otherwise transfer kind of work without confusing the matter. If we move outsource into a different sentence, perhaps we can say, shall not outsource permanently or some version of 100%.
Or maybe take the word outsource out completely. I mean, if the words abolish,
The
merge,
problem is with complete is you may have a situation, as was just referred to, in an emergency where you are completely outsourcing. I can't quite figure it out, but there might be that circumstance. So I wonder whether outsource should be a separate sentence. And it should say that in the absence of an emergency, you can't, I'll call it fully, completely, totally. I'm not sure, Glenn, there might be some language out there that suggests that is different, because outsource doesn't really, I get it. I think it matches. I'm fine with it, but in an abundance of caution, maybe that becomes a separate sentence. Because abolish, merge, they're pretty well defined. Outsource, I hear you on the dictionary language, but I'm not quite sure if somebody challenged it legally where you would go. So maybe we need a bit more verbiage there to suggest that outsource, not 100% completely or permanently. So we leave some wiggle room for outsourcing as needed.
I think what I'm wondering is the language and the verbiage and what we are addressing here deals with outsourcing services. It doesn't really talk about contracting for goods or products, that kind of thing. And I kind of put that in a totally different category. So I'm not 100% sure the language doesn't work the way it is now, since we're talking about two different kinds of things. Services versus goods, products, that kind of thing. But if it helps.
Are we overreacting?
Yes, Ron?
I realize lawyers are involved, but
Thank you.
yeah, I mean, it just seems like, I think the language is pretty solid the way it stands.
Mr. Dunn.
Outsourcing is a little bit confusing sometimes, but I consider through the literature review, when I talk about outsourcing or privatization, you can privatize 100%, not only 90% or something, that you outsource the whole function of the government. Possible finance, if we want to outsource it, outsource it. That's the first step. And I think it's very critical for voter to approve it. Then if we decide to outsource a function of government for some finance again, then we move to the next step, contractor. We find the contractors to deliver that one, and the volume of contracts. I don't know whether in this how we have a kind of clear provision regarding contracting or not.
Just from a public administration perspective, I think what I heard and getting to, and maybe you're correct to put that second sentence for outsourcing, but what don't you want outsourced? And that's managerial control. Whatever, or financial decision, whatever that language we can get to, you don't want the entire operation to be outsourced. And above all, you don't want to relinquish that control, that managerial control and decision-making. Now that would, in essence, take out, the concern we have, maybe the sheriff's office taking over, because they're not going to let go of their managerial control, right? So they're not going to let go of that, nor will Delray say, you get to make all the decisions, we'll just give you firefighters. They're not going to do that. They want managerial and operational control. So if we put something in there that we won't outsource, or I'll leave it to the attorney to come up with the right language, to outsource the managerial control or controlling jurisdiction, or something we had there might be a good closed sentence to kind of define that a little bit more, because you may want to at some point in time, not that we do, but if we had a tight labor market and we couldn't find plant operators, we may want the ability to, if you will, outsource maybe some of the work, but not the control and managerial control, that you could bring in temp work services to fill in the meantime, or some type of contract employee, but you're not letting go of the day-to-day managerial control of the operation. Something like that. However we get there, but something like that might help.
Again, my goal wasn't to create unnecessary complications with this, because I think we've all agreed on what we want. So it's just a language thing. So if the majority of this group, and if Glenn is comfortable with what we've got, then I'd be willing to support it the way it is, sir. I just wanted to bring it up just to be sure that.
Ron, did you have something else you wanted to add?
What about like 51%? You can't outsource or give up more than 51% of control.
Okay. I think what I'm hearing is we need to turn this back to the town attorney to accomplish our intent, but with the language that addresses the issue of outsourcing at an appropriate way.
Yeah, I'd like to make sure that Glenn himself is comfortable with the language. So when question comes up, he can say, no, this is fine. This is what it meant. This is what it says. So that we don't end up, equivocating at the next level about whether the language needs to be changed. Whatever product we submit, I think we should be comfortable with.
Good.
Best we
I
can.
think Marshall kind of hit the nail on the head when he talked about the town may not outsource managerial control and decision-making. I think that's a key part. And if there needs to be any softer language about, the ability to contract, because as the chair indicated, we don't mention goods here. So I don't know that we need to say you're allowed to contract out goods, because they're not mentioned as being restricted. So they should be allowed. So maybe with Marshall's language, that might do the trick.
Okay. Well, without objection, then we'll hold this over for further discussion and receive additional input and language from the town attorney. All right. Thank you. Okay, the next topic is section 20130, the funding limitation, which we discussed at length at the last meeting. And as I understand it, we adopted a change that would provide for 10% of the town's combined operating and enterprise fund budgets as the basis for the funding limitation. I'm open for any further discussion, but that's kind of where we sat last time.
All right, I hesitate. I agree. That's what the group agreed on last time. Really, I wasn't thrilled, but accepting of that. I'm going to give one other thing. I'm going to throw out one last trial balloon, even though I recognize and apologize that this takes us backwards since we agreed on this, but with your indulgence, let me just throw out one other idea for rejection. Again, I think we all agreed that we wanted to liberalize things, and then it was just a question of how do we do that while not necessarily giving the town commission carte blanche. And we talked about the safeguards that were already there with a balanced budget, with requiring referendums for bond issues, et cetera, et cetera. I think the thing that makes me the most uncomfortable about all this is I feel that at a much higher level, namely up to close to $2 million an item, it still gives us room for gamesmanship, kind of gerrymandering around what's a project, what's a line item, what's an operations thing, what's a, different categories. So I'm wondering whether we should still have some kind of limits, but go to a different kind of a system. And I'm just throwing this out there again, like a trial balloon. But maybe we should do somewhat like all the other towns do, which is have no limits, except that we create a couple of more safeguards in addition to the ones that we have. So that currently, for example, the town commission can raise millage rates as high as 10. Our current millage rate is whatever it is, 3.5 or thereabouts. Maybe instead of having limits on individual spending items like we're talking about here, we say that we don't have those kinds of limits, but the town commission, in the absence of a referendum, can only raise millage rates by, I don't know, come up with a percentage, 20% a year, maximum. That's their max. They can't suddenly say your millage rate by a vote of the commission is going from 3.5 to 7. You can only raise it by whatever percent we pick up. The other point of that would be that right now, as far as I understand it, the town commission is not restricted in terms of what percentage of our general reserve fund they can spend at any one time. And one of the things that we might put in, instead of these line item project limits like we're talking about, is put in a limit on that and just say, well, the town commission, and again, I'm making up numbers because I don't know what's right, but the town commission can't spend more than 30% of the general reserve fund in any one, whatever that number should be, maybe it's 50%. But whatever it is, and do that. But those are their constraints rather than trying to put a restraint on an individual project or an individual line item. I think if we do something like that, it's going to cover, have most things covered in like a variety, you can check multiple boxes off where the town commission in a hypothetical situation couldn't quote unquote go off the rails. So last thought, I know my last one wasn't that good. I don't know how much better this is, but the gamesmanship stuff bothers me. And I think what we're doing is we've moved the gamesmanship just up by a factor of 5 or 6, basically, rather than changing the basic system. So that's all. And feel free to dispense with this and we can move on because I understand that we voted 4-1 the last time.
Well, at the last meeting, we agreed that the final report that we would send out would accommodate any minority reports, in effect, letters outlining any positions or further thoughts an individual member might have on a particular topic. And certainly, if there's no interest in changing this any further, you're certainly free to submit some alternates for consideration by the commission within the body of the final report.
I appreciate that. If I might ask, does anybody here think that there's any point in pursuing any of this? Again, I'm not interested in making additional problems. We've had plenty of time to discuss all this over the months. If everybody else is really happy with what we've got, then I'm done on this issue.
Actually, you raised a question, which I supported from the beginning, that I wouldn't want to have a kind of limit on spending. We should look at the limit on the tax raising, the kind of revenues, like you mentioned. Actually, that is what I proposed today.
Yeah, we're going to take up Mr. Ty's comments on the millage rate as one of the items here shortly.
I wasn't aware that I had any comments on.
Yeah,
the
it was
illustration.
one of the late handouts.
Apologize. Let's see it.
Okay. Yeah, I speak for myself. I'm happy with where we're sitting at the moment on this. I don't know if anybody else has any problems. All right, if not, we'll let
Gary?
that. Yes, excuse me, go ahead.
Thanks. I think we need to remember that we are merely recommending what we think by a vote. We can have minority comments, et cetera, but remember, we're not deciding anything. The commission is going to decide what they're going to put out to the voters in terms of changes in the charter. So let's not overdo this. We're merely recommending what we think, and they may toss everything we say out. They have the complete right to do so. So, let's not overthink it. Keep drilling down on this. I think we have basic recommendations. We need to get this done and get it to the commission and let them take over.
Good point, Ron. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on then to section 3021, payment of lawful debts. And we had some language. I wanted to get a little clarification from the town attorney on just one little piece of that, where I think we were trying to get, say, if either the town manager or the finance director is unavailable. And I think inadvertently, maybe that phrase was left out in the sentence.
In the first sentence, it should say the town manager or finance director, and the or finance director is just
Is
left out.
unavailable, right. And I believe that was actually the intent of what we were
Yeah, I
proposing.
think it was an inadvertent mistake, it sounds like, in transcribing this.
Okay.
So
In
Glenn
and
or
of,
somebody, we need to correct that line.
So can you read me what the correct one is? I'm not sure,
yes, this was on payment of lawful debts.
right?
And the language we received back said the checks
Okay.
will be valid only when signed by the town manager and the finance director. If either the town manager is unavailable, we need to say either the town manager or the finance director.
Correct.
It's just a-
Okay, must have just been missed on one of the
Yeah,
versions.
that's all.
Yeah, Okay.
It's a minor thing. In
The one
an
that was-
abundance of caution, I would like to have a motion to adopt with that change. So moved. Is there a second? We have a second. Town clerk would call the roll, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Good.
Vice Chairperson Rosen,
Yes.
Member Kai,
Yes.
Member Greenwald,
Yes,
Chairperson Donaldson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
And Ron, Mr. Remy?
Mr. Remy, I'm sorry about that. Your vote was, thank
Yes.
you.
I'm sorry, Ron?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. All right. We can put closure on that one then. Next item was section 305, salaries of commissioners and mayor. And the intent of what we passed last time was basically have the ordinance stand as is, just put it into the form of a referendum. And that's kind of where we left it. I only had one question, and that is the reference in that where it says this act. Is that in another part we talk about amendments, then in this one we talk about act. Is there a legal distinction there, or do we need to modify that word?
You could say charter.
Right. Act and charter. I think that whoever drafted this years ago meant charter. This act, this charter, this legislation. I'm going to change my words. I'm going to change that word to this charter.
Change this charter
The word
okay, under the provisions of this charter. Okay. Okay. And again, in a abundance of caution, I would ask if we have a motion to replace the language that we previously approved. We have a motion and a second, please.
Motion.
Okay, we have a motion. Ron, you were second, I believe.
Oh, second, okay.
Okay. If the town clerk would call the roll on this, please.
Member Kai, Member Remy,
Yes.
Member Greenwald,
Yes.
Chairperson Donaldson,
Yes?
motion carried. Oh, I'm sorry.
Whoops. Okay.
Vice Chairperson Rosen,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next section has to do, I believe this falls under 401 regarding town manager, duties of town manager. And I also had a question on this one because again, I believe the language we approved at the last meeting did not extend, and this is just, a
You're
point of
correct. Yep.
clarification. Okay, did not extend the protection
Correct.
clause. Okay. So I don't know if anyone else has any further comments on what we passed last time, but I don't. All right. Okay, we'll let that one stand then. Okay. Is anyone aware of any other items that we've overlooked that we need to take up right now as members? Yes, tell me.
Question for Town Attorney Torsivia. If we make the change to 401, are any modifications necessary for 4.03 as it relates to, I think you can leave it, but I just didn't know, and that relates to the police chief, because it also references in that section in 4.03, it says the commission shall have the right and authority to employ a town chief of police, which can stay. Upon vacancy of police, the town manager shall present the town commission with a rank list up to 5 candidates for the position. The commission may terminate the employment of the chief with notice proposed action and reasons thereof as are provided to the chief of police. I don't know that you have to, but is there some need to potentially clean that up a touch?
I think so, because otherwise you have potential conflict between those supervisions. So we'll take 4.03 and make it match what you just voted on 4.01.
And that falls into the category where it can't be done by ordinance. It would have to be done by charter.
Yes. All the ones you've looked at so far, and you're talking substantively, all of them are referendum ones.
Okay. This sounds a bit like a housekeeping item where we've taken one action and it's going to spill over into another. So without objection, will look to the town attorney to bring back some modified language for our consideration at the next meeting. Okay, thank you. Any other items that we may have overlooked or have pending that I may have missed in the process? None? Okay. All right, I would like to move to Mr. Ty's notation that was handed out at the beginning of the meeting. This deals with section 703, annual millage limit. in a discussion he would like to have on that provision. So you have the floor.
Yeah, when I read this one, I felt that the increase is enormous, about 300% of the current mill rate. And if we consider the major project, in this case, we are concerned with the intergenerational equity. That means, those who enjoy the investment benefits should share the cost instead of having this generation to pay for what benefits, in 30 years from now, when we talk about major capital investment. And more than that, taxpayers do have their own financial plan. That's why in the government, the common practice is to have debt, long-term debt. That means the bonds issue took over major projects so that the taxpayers do not have to pay suddenly a high tax rate, like in this case. Normally for 30-year bond or something like that, the interest and pay, the principal will be factored in annual budget. That means only a fraction of the tax increase will be imposed for this capital project, including interest and principal for 30 years. Therefore, we avoid a kind of sudden tax burden on taxpayers, 300% imposed on taxpayers. It is enormous, and it is not really a common practice in the government. That's why we have a long-term debt. And in this city, when I look at the budget, the debt service is very small, less than 1 mil. And therefore, we have room for borrowing money in the future if we have a major capital project instead of having the current taxpayers to pay for that major project. That is my point. Therefore, I would like to suggest that we, instead of having a kind of mills rate increase, I would suggest that the percentage of property tax increase, first of all, 3%, 4%, or 5% annually. And with this, we would protect this fiscal viability of the government and to protect some kind of fiscal bias in the government. Normally, when we have a lot of revenues, government tend to spend all of them to keep the budget base. Because when the annual budget appropriation is made, the base of the previous year budget base. Therefore, when the government has some money, they try to spend all, of the budget in that year. Particularly in the government, the year-end spending is a major problem. The people rush, spend, what is left in the budget so that they can keep the budget base, and then the next year budget, then get more money instead of being cut. So my suggestion is that we seriously consider this provision in the charter. 10 mils increase is too high.
Would the town manager like to address the topic of millage and how it ties in?
Sure. So that's your statutory cap. So you can't go over 10 mils. How you get there has a set of other controls through the truth and millage practices. So if you raise, I just sent a text, hopefully Matt will come in and give you more specific details. But if you increase your millage rate greater than 5-6%, it requires a supermajority vote and a public hearing of the acting commission to raise your taxes that high. So there are other things contemplated, but I guess it doesn't say that you couldn't move forward with that. but hopefully he'll step in here during the conversation. So, and again, there's some other statutory requirements. You can't just arbitrarily start raising taxes. You have to justify it through a balanced and equal budget, and any increases should come along. It requires certain actions to be taken in public. Again, could we go, I guess, technically from our 3.6 mils up to 10? I would say that revolution might be a little word or understated action of this community. But again, you got to think down the road in the future. It's never been a problem in this town. So some of the provisions like the item number 4 that, or 3, that any tax increase requires voter referendum, that would put us in a box. I don't know that you'd ever want to do that. But I would just caution a little bit. This, again, there's a common practice in place to increase taxes. If you were truly concerned of a step up increase of a dramatic proportion that you wanted to control, I guess you could do it. But, you know, we're starting to take the charter and make it into this operational mission, operational task. I think that was something more accomplished with an ordinance. But again, there are certain things that if, you know, we have to report the rollback rates, which is the cost of what your tax rate would be without the increase in value, any percentage. Hopefully Matt will, he's on his way back. He's right now, but I can, you know, send you that percentage, but it does require, I think Matt mentioned it in one of our earlier meetings, it does require a supermajority to go over a relatively small amount. It might be like 5% or 8%. You have to then have 4 of the 5 sitting commissioners would have to approve that increase, which I would think would be a very monumental task here. But again, that's today's common practice. We should feel good that the fiduciary controls in place and the elected body do a great job with it. Absence of all that, what kind of language and controls you need there are kind of difficult.
I'll piggyback on what Marshall could have said if I could, that if you went be above, and I think it is 10% or 8, whatever that percentage is, you need 4/5 vote, then it's unanimous. If you want to go anything beyond that, so then you need a unanimous vote. And kind of the worst case scenario, you know, there are cities who contract with Palm Beach County Fire Rescue for their fire rescue services. That's 3.5 or 3.6 mils all by itself. So if for some reason this town ever did that, you'd be at 7 mils like this. You know, so there's that other lurking potential issue where, you know, they could be an almost not quite out of your control, but that is something that lots of other cities grapple with because, you know, 35% of their maximum is being taken up by another party, sure to provide services that they need in their community. And obviously, if you're in Belle Glade, that's a very small dollar amount, but it's still 35% of their maximum.
Well, if these recommended charter changes go through, then that won't be an issue for us because they wouldn't be able to contract with Palm Beach Fire Rescue unless we had a referendum.
Correct.
And any limitations on taxes that the commission could raise that would be outside of, and I admit I wasn't familiar with, you know, the state or whoever it is that requires that the commission can't raise taxes by more than 6 or 7%. Sounds like a really low number to me, but whatever it is, and I wasn't aware of that. So that's why this discussion is like helpful to me because I looked at it and said, my God, they can raise taxes to 10 mils. That like doesn't sound so good. Potentially. I mean, again, we've never had a problem. So obviously finding out more about what the real situation is rather than talking without that information would probably be helpful.
Ron, you have any input on this one?
No, other than I think that this is solved by laws, et cetera. I don't think we need to address this.
Vice Chair?
I tend to agree with Ron. I think there are enough adequate controls, and if Matt gets here, he certainly can help us, but I think that we've heard that there are significant controls on how the rates get raised that we can rely on. And I think one could always move for a referendum if they thought that there was beyond adequate control. So I'm inclined, as much as I find this interesting, I'm inclined not to want to pursue it at this point.
Yeah, I also appreciate the sentiment, but I think it would have the impact of just really tying up the commission unduly. If you would care to make this part of a minority letter to ask the commission to give consideration, you're certainly welcome to do that as part of the final report. Okay. Thank you. The next item I have down for unfinished business that I forgot to mention, at the last meeting, Mayor Hillman had asked if we consider some priorities as we start to reach our final conclusions. We have a couple of things, I think, still pending. So I don't know if you're ready to have that discussion yet, or if you'd like to defer that until we've got a little tighter wrap on the items. We did receive a form with the ones that we have under consideration or that we have adopted that you can use as a guideline for the next meeting. So we can either do a straw poll currently and see where everyone's sitting on their priorities, or do it now and do it at the next meeting, or wait for the next meeting, whatever your pleasure might be.
Whatever you want. I think we can do it at any time. I don't think it'll change that much based on, on final language. I don't think that'll change the importance of the items.
Well,
I agree. I'm up for it. Like, I mean, there's nothing that's going to change in the language. Why don't we just do it now? Let's get it
Okay.
over with.
all right. Okay. Ron, our ballot form was kind of handed out here today. Do you have that list by any chance? Or can I?
I do not, unless it came in an email.
Well, let's do this. If you want to jot this down real quick. I can run down the list. Okay.
Go ahead.
I'll run down the list if you want to jot these down and give a moment of thought about how, which one you would put first, second, third, fourth.
Sure.
Okay. So we have section 106, terms of office. Section 107, rules of procedure. That had to do with the meetings, requiring one meeting each month. Section 2019, the fire and rescue. That had to do generally with the clause we had on outsourcing and so forth, which is still pending. Section 201, funding limits. Then we had section 302, payment of lawful debts concerning who can sign checks. Section 305, salaries. Oh, I'm sorry. Beverly, did we miss one?
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just emailed that list to Mr. Riami,
Okay.
so he should have it.
All right, you should have an email in your box shortly also.
Okay.
And the last one is 401 town manager.
Okay.
That might be helpful for people listening on online as well, to know which ones we're putting under consideration. So if I to proceed, if everybody just like to mark it up, and we'll see which ones rise to the top, and I'm sure we'll continue to float on this at the next meeting as well. Okay, while Ron's looking at that, maybe Mr. Ty, would you like to start with your list of priorities, 1 through 7?
I think that's okay. The current one, you know. I don't have any, one as the first priority. I've got to follow this order. Yeah, it doesn't matter to me.
Okay, you don't have a ranking of
No,
1 through?
just follow this order.
Mhm, okay. Dr. Grimwald, you have any thoughts yet on ranking?
I can give you a ranking. I mean, I know that this is the mayor's request and we should go do it. I mean, I think all these things should just be considered rather than ranked and gee, we only got to the first 3 kind of thing. I don't think that would be a good idea, but
Okay,
at his request, and I could be easily dissuaded from this list, but for a start, sort of reflects how much time we spend on these things, I think. But I guess I'd go funding limits for 1, fire and rescue protection for 2. 3, I actually have town manager because I think the scope of his office is important. Terms of office, section 106, I have 4th. Payment of lawful debts, 5th. Rules of procedure, quorum and meetings, 6th, and salaries of commissioners and mayor, 7th.
Vice Chair Rosen, thoughts on ranking at this point?
I have some ranking. I'm not sure I'm permanently wedded to any of these, but fire and rescue protection is number 1. And the funding limits are number 2. I think terms of office would be 3. The payment of debts would be 4. The town manager would be 5. The rules of procedure would be 6. And the salaries would be 7.
Okay. Where I'm sitting at this point is I've got the funding limits as 1, terms of office as 2, fire and rescue protection as 3, the 401 town manager as 4, 302 payment of lawful debts as 5, 305 salaries as 6, and section 107 rules, quorums, meetings as number 7. It's kind of where I'm sitting at this point. Ron, you have any thoughts on this one?
Sure. So, I mean, it looks like, and I'm in agreement, looks like, whether you have 1 or 2 fire and rescue and funding, I think we all seem to agree that that's 1 or 2. And then, I'm good with, obviously one of those is 1 and one of those is 2. And then I think terms of office and town manager seem to be the next 2. And then, I think obviously rules and procedures and the salaries come in last and the signing is before that. I think it seems to be like we're all sort of hovering in that area.
Yeah.
And I'm in agreement with all that.
Like, I'm sure the mayor and town commissioners are listening in or will be on the recording. So, they'll get a bit of a gist of, our thoughts on this. We don't have to officially issue a priority list, but I think these kinds of discussions sort of give them a lead into where our thought process is as they consider their own priorities. So appreciate the input. Thank you. Okay, Is there any other unfinished business that we have left over? There's none. We'll close unfinished business and move on to the draft charter review board report. We had issued as part of our, part of our packet, a draft that I had started on. And subsequent to that, I continued to make some improvements on it. I had some errors and omissions and fleshed out a couple of the narrative sections for an initial review. We obviously still have much work to do on this, but I'd like to at least today get a feel from the board regarding, in particular, items listed under the contents and how that's organized, and if there are any other sections that we feel are urgently needed as part of this. My objective is to try and keep our report as concise and as tight as we can, and rely on the minutes of the meetings as the permanent record of the discussion and the agreement, rather than trying to recreate a narrative that talks about our thought process, because I think that might run afoul of what we approved as part of the minutes. And to start to pull this together within the context of a fairly tight document that the commission can take up and that people can easily comprehend and without having to infer too much in the narrative. Vice Chair Rosen.
This is just a minor issue because I think this is a very good summary. The only thing that I would suggest is I think we had extended review on everything. So I guess my suggestion, just from a wording standpoint, is to either include it in everyone or to remove it from all of them, the word extended.
Whoops, I'm sorry, come again.
We have, in some of your sections, you have after extended review.
Yes.
And in other ones, you have after consideration or
Yeah.
after review.
Mhm.
I think the minutes with a live tape will show that they were all considered.
Mhm.
I think the notion of extensiveness was just the discussion about agreement or non-agreement or choice of wording. So my suggestion is they're either all extensive review or considered review, or they're just after
Just a
review.
review. Point taken.
Because it just seems to suggest that some of them were less important than the others, and I don't think that that's necessarily something that we want to convey.
Okay.
Other than that, I think it's a very nice summary.
I agree. I think it's a nice summary and I commend you for doing it. I appreciate your putting in the effort to do it. One quick comment. I know we're not going through to make changes at this point, but certainly on the members of the Charter Review Board, it's customary to have the chairman's name first and then the vice chair after that, and then the members and then staff. And there probably should be some sort of an asterisk after my name, since I was not appointed to this committee originally and was appointed by somewhat of a different process and missed the organizational meeting and was a late addition to the group. So I don't know how that works, but
Okay.
it is different, certainly. That's it. But I think that this kind of a report is a good idea. I like your outline, and I appreciate the fact that you're putting in all the work to lead us in this effort.
Okay. Thank you. We'll certainly have time to, we're a ways from adopting anything yet. This is obviously first cut. And I'll continue to work actually with the town manager and the town attorney, whose comments and language have been absorbed into this. So we'll jointly continue to refine this and get it to the point where we think it's ready for a good edit and then later move to adoption. So in the meantime, between now and the next meeting, if you see other pieces or other parts, please mark it up and bring it back for the next meeting. We'll take a look. See what we can do with that. And Mr. Ty, if I could ask, please, well, anyone who wants to submit a letter regarding the thing, but I have a section for you called other recommendations because we did at one of the meetings make a motion to adopt one recommendation that was not a charter change, but we suggested the commission take a look at, where they might be able to reorganize or streamline the charter by ordinance. And certainly that was kind of fell into the other category. And if there are any others, but again, anyone who wishes to file a minority report letter, give your thoughts to that and start formulating that. Nobody's going to edit it. It's your letter. And we'll bring those together at the end and include those in the report. Okay. Any other suggestions on the report? Okay, we'll move ahead then, and we'll bring this back to you. Okay, so we'll close that one. Move on to announcements. I would like to remind everyone that on August 5th at 9 o'clock in the morning, we have a coffee with the mayor. This was a program instituted some time ago. It's been a while since it's been done, so I applaud the mayor for bringing this back. There is an RSVP list on the town website. You can go on there or call the office and request a spot to attend it. I've been to several in the past. They're very informative, very good. I'm glad to see this coming back. So that's good news. Okay, there being no further business, well, let's see, we've got another meeting coming up. I'm trying to think here. We don't actually have another meeting scheduled. We need to schedule another meeting. I might ask everyone's availability maybe for a week from today, if that might shake out fairly well.
Fine.
Yes.
Okay, I'll turn that over to the town clerk though, and she'll survey the group, confirm that. But tentatively, we would try to get together August 3rd, 2 p.m.
Yeah,
August 3rd is
Did I say the 3rd? That would be the 2nd, wouldn't it?
that would be 2 weeks.
Okay. Let's see,
26.
excuse me. You're right, I'm ahead of myself.
If we could buy an extra week as we put
It would
the
help.
final, because while it's a week away, really it's only like 3 or 4 days before I have to tell Beverly to start putting all the packets together. So if we did 2 weeks out, I think that would be great. Give us a little bit of breathing room, get all the final edits together, give Chairman Donaldson a little bit of time to assemble the document and go from there.
Okay,
I'm just, whenever
August
we want to
2nd?
have meetings before August 19th is good for me. I'm not sure what our deadline as a group is. It may be sliding a little, I'm not sure, but I'm going to be leaving town on the 19th, and not be able to be in touch, which if nothing else should make the meetings go quicker. But anyway, I won't be here at that point.
I think that's within the time frame that we would all like to have this wrapped up by. So I think you're on good grounds there.
The 2nd is open, which is the Monday.
Could we do it? Would it be
2 weeks from today?
squeezing too much to be doing it before the 2nd? Maybe doing it that Thursday, perhaps before?
We could do it on Friday if we wanted.
Some of us may try to go away that first week in August, so we're
Okay.
Are you talking about the 29th or 30th?
If the 2nd is available, let's go with it and I'll
Yeah.
But
I'll
if we could
Zoom
do the
if I have
29th,
to.
29th looks open too.
Well, let's survey for the 2nd and see if that'll work.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
So Beverly, will you send out an email to the group, just maybe this afternoon, a quick email, like just let me know your availability on these times and go from there?
Yes.
And then we'll get back in touch with everybody and final date. And
Okay.
before you conclude, Matt's going to talk about trim. So basically, is it 110% of your rollback you can do, but it requires a super majority? I think it was 110%, I think the statute says, or something like that, but it's the rollback rate, or is it those,
You can exceed the rollback rate, but there's a maximum millage rate that is permitted in terms of the increase, and how far you go above rollback determines whether it can be done. There's a formula under state law by simple majority, by supermajority, or by a unanimous vote of the commission. And it is, as Marshall said, I think 110% can be done by simple majority. When you get a little higher, it requires, as I said, a supermajority. And I can't remember the exact percentage, but it is determined by, it is something in the vicinity of 110%. I don't have the exact. If once you get to a certain point, yes.
so what we'll do is Matt will do a little,
I'll do a little
research.
summary and
We'll-
send around.
we'll send an email
Yeah,
out to
and it'd be
everyone.
only really a couple of bullet points to
Sure.
sort of summarize it.
Sure, I think it'll be useful to have. I'll share it with the commission as well, and we'll put it on the finance webpage so people know what those limitations are. I know we always quickly talk about it during all our budget hearings, but those aren't really the most fun meetings for folks and low attendance. So we'll get that message out there.
Yeah, Matt, you may need some footnotes. I don't, for example, know exactly what you mean by rollback. I don't
Right,
know what that
right.
is.
Okay,
So-
that's sort of
And when you say-
specifically defined by
Yeah,
state
so when
law.
you say
as well.
110%, you don't mean you can increase the tax rate by 110%, which would be more than doubling it. You mean by 10%?
I mean, 10%. No, it would not be double. I would certainly require a majority or a unanimous vote.
Right, but we're still talking about a unanimous vote of the commission, not a public referendum or anything. It'd be a unanimous vote of the commission.
The one sentence I remember from, I'm kind of trying to pull it up on the fly here, but it's a unanimous or voter referendum. There's two options. So if you can't get a commission to approve that big number, the voters could do it on their own to push that big number.
Right, but from our standpoint, I think we're looking at it the other way. You know, whether it should be up to the voters to approve something, not like just the unanimous commission.
Are you?
Anyway, the fact is, we don't know what the facts are, or I don't know what the facts are. So if you
Sure,
could
we can certainly.
illuminate
summarize
us, that would be helpful.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Okay. No other items. We stand adjourned.